Hello everybody, welcome back to Hidden Harvest with Liz. My name is Liz, and today we're going to be talking about something a little bit different in my office instead of out in the garden, because we're going to be talking about journaling. And if you don't know, a lot of gardeners out there keep journals of their experiments, observations, when certain things happen in their garden. And this is actually a common practice among tons of gardeners and a lot of people who do experimentation. And I say that as most gardeners experiment with the plants that they are growing, when they start them, how many they start, and everything else like that. So let's just get into having a conversation about different ways to keep track of the things that you've got going on in the garden. First off, I would definitely recommend every single year having your garden plan ready. And I keep my garden plans and long-term plans in a 3-ring binder. That way I can take pages out, put pages in. If I've got research papers that I'm going in here and like soil tests, or if there's like a particular plant that I'm thinking about adding to the permaculture area, if I don't know, if there's like a specific flower that I'm getting because I want a certain type of creature to come and reside in my garden, like I want a predatory creature to come live in my garden to eat some of the pests, and I've done research on this particular thing, this is the notebook I would probably keep that kind of information in. Namely, my diagrams for my garden. I have got like the roughest of sketch right here on the layout. And then I have got like basically ideas on what I wanted. And then I actually did like a sketch. I'm not sure how well you guys can see these. I actually did a sketch of the layout for my irrigation system whenever I put that in. I had the papers where I actually did measurements for my irrigation system. I have got back in September, I'm not sure that you guys can see this. This is like the worst lighting ever. There is my fall garden plan basically for September. And anytime I do a garden plan, I try to do that. Now, I've actually started putting my garden plan online, which I did not online, but on a paint thing, so I could just erase or add in or whatever. But for the most part, if I had a printer, and if they didn't choose to do a battle pass for a freaking printer, I would probably print those up and put these inside a notebook so I could carry them around with me. As it is, since there are battle passes on dumb things, I just opted to email it to myself so I could look at it on my phone instead. So this is like my long-term scheduling notebook. The way I have my irrigation, the types of irrigation parts that I ordered, where I ordered it from, the receipts for ordering it, all that kind of information, the garden plan that I have for the year, my overall entire yard plan. I know I haven't talked about the title of the channel, Hidden Harvest, a lot at all, because it is a long process to do the thing that I am wanting to do, which is basically to make a garden that is hidden in plain sight. But on top of the garden that is hidden in plain sight, you also need an area for distraction, which is the reason why I have the main garden. It's not going to be the only one, and that will come later, which is basically what this notebook is. It's like a 5-year to 10-year plan. 5-year, yes. 10-year, iffy plan on how I want the garden to go from here until then. And a bit of my garden planning as far as the sketches go, my irrigation, long-term ideas that I have for possibly adding more things into the homesteading thing. I have already got chickens. I am thinking about having some sort of meat source, regardless to which way we decide to do it. We haven't actually made any choices on that one. I have a hard time with the subject, and I have a hard time researching it for obvious reasons. For those of you who know, you know. But every person should be able to provide at least some bit of all of the nutrition that you need. Even if you can't provide 100%, you should be able to provide some percentage of it. So it's a thought, but it's like a 5-year thought. First things first, I've got to get the garden established, get the irrigation in that we're working on, get some fruit trees planted, which I've already started on. Those types of things are my first years that I am planning on doing. But this by itself would not be the only thing that I would want to keep. First off, it's very bulky. Whenever I get things that pop into my head that I want to try and cook, and I have never made it before, like I just recently tried homemaking muffins. I know that's weird, but I haven't homemade muffins ever. So I wrote down the the recipe for it, and then I'll do a couple of trials of it, and after a while I'll eventually make my own cookbook of things that I like and the recipes that I actually like. And so that's basically what this notebook is for. Plus, this tie-in happens inside this notebook because eventually I'm going to have to find more recipes for the things that I'm actually growing, which is why I thought this was a good combo. From day to day, the things that I need to write down, the stuff that I've started, like the seeds that I had to reseed, my thoughts on why the seeds didn't work. Those types of ideas go into this. It's like the cheapest notebook you can potentially get at any store. They're usually on sale right after school starts. You can get like a whole flat of these for like $5 maybe, or $3 or $2 or something like that. But I just decided to go with this one because chances are this notebook, this design for this notebook, has been around since I was a child. Therefore, whenever I finally decide I'm ready to go back and get my second notebook, hopefully I should be able to find this notebook again, and all of my journals will look the same. Because it might actually drive me nuts to have 5 or 6 different designs on my notebooks. But that's neither here nor there. Inside this notebook, I have actually gone through, because I didn't get this notebook until after, it was like the beginning part of April. I was like, I really need to start keeping notes on this stuff, so I went and grabbed this notebook. And even though I hadn't got it at the beginning of the year, I went back and all of the notes that were in here about what I started, how I started it, and stuff like that. In here, I just put what I started and when I started, and then what I started and when I started the next time. In here, I actually put the why of, I don't understand why it didn't start. I think it might be this or this. This is what I'm trying on my next one. Basically, this is my day-to-day journal on what's going on in my seed starting area, what's going on with different experiments that I'm working on, what's going on in the garden, what has sprouted, what doesn't seem like it ever sprouts every time I put it out there. Concerns that I have, like one of my peppers has yellowed, and I think I may have, after some research and keeping eyes on it, I may have determined that it's just because it's been overwatered with all the watering I was doing, with all the watering, all the rain that we were getting, that potentially it was that. So this is basically if you were a scientist and you were running an experiment on this thing or that thing, this would be my notebook for all of my observations, my thoughts, my feelings on a certain subject, ideas on things that I need to go look up that I may not know enough information about, things like that. Just anything that has to do with the garden, anything from this flower in this particular spot in this bed was red. And the reason I'm doing that is, what if I decide later on I want to transplant that into another area of my garden, and it's a perennial, but it doesn't have blooms when I move it. How am I going to know what color that bloom was unless I wrote it down somewhere? And I actually have sections in here from when I started up, like my garlic. I didn't have all my garlic names written down here. I had to go back outside and actually get the names of my garlic and write them down somewhere because I didn't do it. Here, I actually wrote down when I started my potatoes. And then on top of that, later on when I was thinking about this, about when it would be that I should expect my potatoes to come out, I went and looked at last year's potatoes. Now, this is not the exact science, because I'm doing different potatoes this year than I did last year, but I was just kind of curious, when did I get them out last year? How long? When do I expect them to come out now? When should I start looking for them to do the thing that they have to do in order for me to know that it's time for those potatoes to come out? What did I plant in there the last year after that, which was the sweet potatoes? So about when should I start ordering my sweet potato slips if I'm going to order them, which I'm trying to start mine. I'm just doing a very bad job at doing it. So that, and I'm not really sure that I want to do the same type of sweet potatoes. I actually think I want to change types. But right now it's kind of an experiment anyway. So my sweet potatoes are sitting in there, they're creating slips, and I'm learning how to do it. But I might decide what I want permanently for my garden are not those types of sweet potatoes. I want more of a bush style instead of a vine style. They'll still vine, but they won't vine as much. We'll see. I'm getting off topic. Like I put down In here, while I was thinking about the potatoes, oddly enough, I'm hungry right now, which shouldn't surprise anybody. I'm talking about potatoes. I actually went through, and whenever I got the name of my potatoes, I went through and found out how long to maturity, when should I expect this to happen, like right here, which one of these two, and when would be a good date for me to think about pulling the entire bed. So it was basically like, this is my workbook. This is where I figure out my maths when I want to start keeping an eye on it. This one I'm talking about my onions. Like I said, I got this notebook in April, so I had to go back and get all my information, pull it from my phone, from out in the garden, from in here, and tie it all in here so I could find all of it. So I wrote down my types of onions, when my onions came up. Now, what's interesting is I actually noted down when my onions came out last year. This time, I'm growing different types of onions, and I don't think I'm going to have the same issues I had last year. So these results are going to be different than last year's results. And then over here, I actually did a diagram where I was talking about one of my perennial spaces. I actually did a page at the beginning for each of my perennial spaces, talking about the types of plants and what happened, what they're called, and everything else like that. Like the sunchokes, I thought that I killed them off, but they actually survived an exceptionally heavy harvest, and as a matter of fact, some of them are surviving inside of my compost bin. Now I know not to compost those. It's odd, but obviously you don't even use a little tiny piece of the sunchoke into your compost bin, or you're going to wind up with them everywhere. So, like the snapdragons, I went out there and figured out what color this one is. Oh, this one, I actually did not go back. The snapdragon in this particular bed right here, I actually wrote it in because it finally bloomed. I completely forgot. This one is white. Did I put it on the other one? No, I did not. The other one is a red and white. So as I continue to go through this thing, I will have all of this information and say whenever I'm sipping hot chocolate or drinking some coffee during the winter time, planning for my next year's garden, I will be able to go through and say, okay, I remember what flower was in here. Do I want to move it before, because right now it's going to be hibernating. Not really hibernating. They had leaves the whole season. They looked very pitiful, but they're basically dormant. I could move them if I wanted to. So if there's another place, it's like, hey, I've got white. What if I move this over to another bed where this white flower would look good with these other flowers? Stuff like that. So while I'm in the planning phase in between seasons, this notebook will come in handy because I've actually got the perennials listed here, the colors or the type or whatever else might be helpful. I also, I was talking about this one first. It's also a perennial bed, but I realized not even in this notebook, which was originally where I was supposed to be keeping all of this information at, I never wrote down the style of blueberries that I had, and I actually thought my blueberries were dead. So I started planting other things in there, like perennials that I was trying to save over from the next year, and I planted them in this bed. And since then, I have taken all of the perennials out of this bed and moved them out into other locations. So as soon as those guys get established, and I know they haven't died on me, I think all of them survive the transplant, but a new diagram with the way this stuff is sitting is going to be drawn. And basically, I will be writing down, hey, I got notes about this, that, and the other, and why I moved it, and things like that. This one is like the entire driver's side area, which is mostly perennial spaces, and I've got the style, how I did them, when they came up, how long they took, why I decided to do it this way. Case in point, one of the smaller beds, I decided I didn't think that they were going to survive. I took sunflower heads from my last year's sunflowers, and I broke up the entire sunflower and just dropped it into one of the beds, covered it up, and walked away. I have got so many sunflowers in there, it's ridiculous. I did not realize that all of it was fertilized. I didn't realize all of it would come up, and I've had to slowly thin them. But it did tell me with that experiment that if I take those and my amaranth and take the heads off of them and store them in my garage, that they were still viable the next year. As a matter of fact, that basically took care of the cold that they needed in order to sprout if they needed it. Anyway, I digress. That's like a little bit of show and tell inside of my notebook. You guys got to see inside of my notebook. But those are the kinds of things that I have in there. I've got dates when I planted things, dates when I think the maturity will happen, when I should start expecting to harvest them. The only thing I really didn't go through and do is things like how long till the peppers are going to start being harvestable. When are my tomatoes going to start doing their thing? Because all of my tomatoes are going to come in on a variety of dates. There was no sense in me trying to do all of them individually. I have got a lot of information inside of my notebook that I will never be able to remember for the next year. And I also use my phone. I've got another form of journalizing. That's not a word. Journaling would be if you're not really all that interested in writing things down and trying to keep track of it. Another thing would be taking a picture of it, because at the bottom of the picture, it will actually give you the date on when certain things happen. And you can look at the picture and say, okay, I see raspberries. So that means my raspberries started producing on this date. Today is the 28th. This is the first time I've seen a ripe raspberry on that bush. So that means I can expect next year, possibly, for them to ripen on that date. So this is another form, even if you don't want to sit there and do notes or anything else like that, or heck, maybe you just don't want to because your hands cramp up, or it's just not inspirational to sit down with a notebook. I like writing on paper. I much prefer writing on paper than I do on PC. Whichever way you have to journal, the big notebook where you can take things out and rewrite them and make them pretty, I'm just going to write. It doesn't matter whether or not it's sloppy, whether or not I spelt everything correctly, whether or not I'm missing information or whatever. Just every single day, write down some journal about the observations that are going on inside your garden, which is actually what I've been kind of talking about in my last couple of episodes, is going through the garden and making observations. Every time you go out there, there's a chance that you might catch a weed before it gets too embedded in the garden and seeds. You might catch a plant that has a disease that you probably need to pull out before other plants catch it. Maybe you can catch a plant that has yellowing of the leaves and it's time to fertilize or something like that. Or maybe, I don't know, you might have forgotten like the last 3 times to water the garden or any other thing. It might be the time that you finally see the plant that you've been waiting for to bloom. So, daily observations are important, plus daily observations in all of the experiments that you're doing whenever it comes to trying to get things to sprout or grow or train a certain way or things like that. So keeping notes of that will help you out later on as a gardener. Right here, I actually have a passion flower, and I put the date that I started it, the name of it, and how long it's going to take to germinate. Now, I've actually put notes about this inside of my journal because there's a couple of other things that I did not put on here that probably could help. First off, passion flower needs sun to germinate, apparently. So I've actually got this covered. If it needs sun to germinate, the seeds are a little bit big for a plant who the seeds need light to germinate. So I covered it with plastic so it would catch all the water and I won't accidentally overwater it, because I've got a bad tendency of overwatering and burying my seeds too deep. So I've got plastic over it to keep me from watering it. I placed them on the top. I just sprinkled some vermiculite on there, and that's how I'm going to try it. Passion flower is supposed to be something for people who got a lot of experience and a lot of patience, and I have neither, because for the longest time, I bought my starts every single year. This year is my first year really starting seeds. Last year, I kind of sort of started seeds. And I say kind of sort of, I did start my seeds last year. I had an iffy turnout, if you know what I mean. Actually, I would say, I don't know. I feel more confident about this year's seeds than I did last year's seeds. But that's also because I knew that no matter what I grew last year, it wasn't going to turn out great because they were fresh beds. But I digress. All of my experiments, I also put notes on why I did certain things, like the fact that this needs sunlight in order to sprout, the fact that it takes 30 days and a whole lot of patience, and the way in which I tried to do it this time, because there's a good chance it won't sprout. Which method did I use? I won't know if I don't write it down because I've got a bad memory. That is all I had to say really about journaling. Doing the observations and writing in a journal, having yourself a long-term journal and a short-term journal where you're just like nodding, not even really fully thinking things through. It's like, I went outside, I fertilized. That way later on in the week, you're like, oh geez, what day did I fertilize? I don't even remember. Billy Bob came over and Margaret was having one of her episodes, and I remember I burnt that pie, but what day was that? It's like, just keeping a journal would make it a whole lot easier and you don't have to ask yourself. Or, like I said, snap a picture. There's a lot of times that I don't have time to run to my journal, so I'll just snap a quick picture to make sure that I have the date. That way I know to go back and put it into my journal. After the last 2 episodes, well, what will be 1.5 episodes, because the other one would have been spliced in here because I forgot to plug in my microphone for that particular one. But as you can see, I did in fact do what I put inside my journal and what I talked about last time. From my observation, I've replaced a couple of plants. And I would definitely recommend, whenever you do your journals, if you're starting to look at a plant, like, okay, all of the other plants are far exceeding this particular plant, write it down. Or all of the plants are doing this, but this plant is doing this, write it down. Because you may find out after a while that there's something you actually need to do for that, but if you don't remember the last time you saw it, or when you took note of it, it might be, has it been doing that? Or has it been like, maybe I'm just overthinking and it really hasn't been all that long. But no, it was a week ago, and a week ago it was looking like this. I probably need to do something. This plant's yellow and it's been yellow for a week. Let me do a thing. Ladies and gentlemen, I will see you guys in our next episode. Thank you guys so much for being here. And our next episode will be our garden tour. I'll see you then. You have a wonderful day off that, and you stay shiny. Bye.